It's time for your Milwaukee Bucks to take on the Kings in the NBA Finals. After defeating the Boston Celtics in the first round, the 7th-seeded Indiana Pacers in the second round, and finally beating the Miami Heat in the conference finals, we found ourselves taking on the Sacramento Kings with a very young and upcoming squad of Tyreke Evans, and of course their center, DeMarcus Cousins. This is possibly going to be the toughest series we have played in this entire rebuild so far, so let's head on down to the court and see how this team can do in game one. Neither team had scored on their first possession, but Omar Kasipi would get things started for Sacramento, putting them up 3-0 with that shot as we were going to the pick and roll, and it would be Andrew Bogut getting things started for us down low. He would head to the free throw line and knock down both of his shots, but the Kings would answer right back with another 3 from the top of the key. Sacramento was off to a hot start on offense here in game one, and we were finding ourselves trying to play catch up the entire first quarter tonight. With just over a minute to go in the first quarter, we had a chance to tie it up for the first time tonight, and then Larry Sanders, coming off of a pump fake on the left baseline, would knock home this layup, giving us our first lead of the entire game, and we'd follow that up with a Dante Wooden 3, so we would head to the second quarter with only a 3-point lead over the Kings. That would quickly be erased with that shot, and then Aaron Brooks with the step back jumper. An insane shot there from the vet, as both teams now were trading 3 balls. Our lead had grown to 8 over Sacramento, and we were trying to extend that here in the final 2 minutes of the first half, and the Kings, now down by double digits, were trying to get something to happen before halftime, but Tyreke Evans would only hit 1 of his 2 free throws before half, and we'd head into the locker room with an 11-point lead. We wanted to capitalize on this momentum we had to the start of the second half, but things were not off to a great start with this turnover, and our offense had to keep scoring points as Sacramento was slowly fighting their way back into this one. They had got their deficit back under double digits and counting, and I don't know what type of defense Brandon Jennings was playing here, as he would leave Aaron Brooks wide open for 3, and with that, it was only a 2-point game as Boogie Cousins would go to work on Tyson Chandler, tying it back up. Sacramento was on a 17-6 run here to end the third quarter against us, and even though we still held the lead headed into the fourth quarter, a 2-point lead wasn't going to do much against this hot Kings offense. Aaron Brooks had been absolutely torching us so far in the second half, both through his shooting and passing, and because of him, Sacramento had jumped out to a 4-point lead. Just like in the first quarter, we were now trying to play catch up with the Kings, but that wasn't going to happen if we kept leaving Aaron Brooks with wide open looks at a 3-pointer like this. Only 20 seconds to go and we were down by 7. It was not looking good, but Brandon Jennings would hit this 3, and now we had to start intentionally fouling and sending them to the line, but the Kings would hit all of their fourth quarter free throws, and being down by 8 with only 5 seconds left in the game, there is not much else we could do, as this shot from Jennings would not fall, and Sacramento would walk away with a victory here in game one. We won't have a shot at winning the finals if we get outplayed every night like we did in the fourth quarter tonight, so let's see if we can turn things around here headed into game 2. We definitely wanted to see a different result here in game 2 than we did in game 1 against the Kings, and unlike last game, we would score the first bucket of the night, but Boogie Cousins would respond for Sacramento. It wouldn't take long for our 3-point specialist Dante Wooden to get involved in the offense, as he would knock this down, and we would go right back to him on the opposite side of the arc for another one. The Kings' 3-point shooting had killed us late in the fourth quarter in game number 1, and Aaron Brooks already seemed to be out to a hot start for the Kings' offense tonight yet again. Both teams' offenses seemed to be scoring at will here throughout the entire first quarter, and headed into the second, it was only a 5-point lead for us, but that would quickly change with this shot. Down by 2, Anderson would give the Kings their first lead of the game, but our offense wasn't slowing down at all and would answer right back. Getting our lead back up to 6 now, we were trying to extend this before halftime, and had an opportunity to go up by double digits as Brandon Jennings' last second shot would not fall, and we would head to the locker room with an 8-point lead over the Kings. Jason Thompson would get things started for Sacramento here in the second half, but we would finally find ourselves up by double digits for the first time today and would extend that with this Brandon Jennings 3. That lead wouldn't last for long though, as the Kings were shooting their way right back into this, as they had cut this down to only a 4-point deficit with under a minute to go in the third. If we couldn't slow down this Sacramento offense, it looked like it was going to be another close one here in the fourth quarter tonight, as we only had a 5-point lead headed to the final quarter of play. Up by 9, Edward Marsh would get things started with a nice entry pass to Andrew Bogut in the paint, but Jason Thompson was a force we still could not stop here in the second half tonight. No matter how much we seemed to pull away from the Kings, they would just find themselves getting right back into this one, as this Omer Kasipi 3 would bring it right back to a 6-point game. With just over a minute to go, Kasipi would knock knock down another shot for Sacramento, and we now found ourselves trying to hold on to what was only a 2-point lead. That 3 from Jennings would make it 5, but now it was only 3 as Carl Landry would make it 1. But I have no idea what Sacramento was doing, allowing Brandon Jennings to get an easy bucket, and not only that, they decided not to take a 3 with less than 15 seconds to go, as they would miss this shot, and Brandon Jennings would knock down both of his free throws, giving the Kings only 6 seconds left as they were down by 5 and would hit this 3, but it would be too little too late as we would get the Game 2 victory thanks to a 15-point, 6-assist night from Brandon Jennings, as we were headed to Milwaukee for the first time in the NBA Finals with the series tied 1 apiece. We had a chance to take our first lead in this series over the Kings, and hopefully it would be a little easier tonight as we were at home for the first time. Brandon Jennings would get us our first bucket of the night, and then it would be Dante Wooden hitting this transition 3, and it would take almost 2.5 minutes for the Kings to finally find their first bucket of the night. Once they did though, their offense would start heating up as well, and this bucket from Lonnie Roberts would be the last one of the first quarter, as we now had an 8-point lead over the Kings and counting in the second. Our offense was heating up right as their offense was starting to get cold now, and it took them even longer in the second to find their first bucket than it did the first. Sacramento was finally starting to knock down some shots, but they could have used this offense earlier, as this 3-pointer from Dante Wooden right before halftime would put us up by 17. The Kings would get one last chance to get a bucket before halftime though, as Jason Thompson would go to the line, and he would knock down both of his free throws for Sacramento, but they still trailed by 15 headed into halftime. Even though we had a decent sized lead over Sacramento, we couldn't let our foot off the gas pedal, as we had gone up by 20 points over them and this lead was still growing. If we had learned anything about this team through the first 2 games of the series though, it was that they can get hot, and they can get hot quick in the second half, and that seemed to be the case here throughout the third quarter tonight, as what was once a 20-point lead was now only a 10-point lead. Thankfully, Edward Marsh would knock down one last shot for us before the end of the third quarter, so we would still have a double-digit lead headed into the start of the fourth tonight. Again though, a double-digit lead against this Kings team didn't mean much, as they had the entire fourth quarter to claw their way back into it. They had got this lead back down to only single digits for us, and with less than a minute to go, we were only up by 8 as Brandon Jennings would find Dante Wooden for 3, extending this lead back to double digits, but the Kings would get it down to 7, and that layup from Tyreke Evans would get it to 5, but once again, absolutely no defense, leading to a late easy bucket from Brandon Jennings, as even though we almost blew a 20-point lead, we would still get the victory here at home, with Dante Wooden putting up an impressive 17 points for us tonight, giving us a 2-1 series lead with Game 4 in Milwaukee again. This was our chance to put the pressure on the Kings in the series, as if we could win this last game here at home, we would go up 3-1 on the road. But unfortunately for us, Tyreke Evans got hot in the first quarter tonight, and that is absolutely the last thing we can let happen if we want to win this game tonight. Thankfully, after a slow start, Lonnie Roberts would get us our first lead of the game, but Aaron Brooks would find his way to the bucket for one last bucket before the end of the first, and we would have a 1-point lead headed into the second until Omar Kasipi would hit this 3. We now found ourselves down by 6 and needed to make a dent into this deficit, with Dante Wooden's 3 making it only a 3-point game, and Andrew Bogut and 1 would be able to tie this game back up at the charity stripe. Unfortunately for us, Tyreke Evans had not slowed down at all throughout the second quarter, and he had helped the Kings maintain a lead headed into halftime. Sacramento would waste no time going to work and getting some early buckets against us in the second half, and while our offense was cold as ice, Tyreke Evans was still on fire. He had almost single-handedly got the Kings a 10-point lead here in the third quarter, as Omar Kasipi would extend it to an 11-point lead for them, and things weren't looking good for us headed into the fourth. If we were going to get back in this game and win it, we'd have to rely on Dante Wooden, and right on cue, he would show up for us by knocking down 2 3-pointers to start the fourth. While it wasn't a double-digit lead, we were still trailing by a couple of baskets, but for the first time in the second half, Dante Wooden would tie it up for us. Every time we'd manage to tie it up though, we'd let the Kings build their lead back over us, and with just over a minute to go, we needed some big-time buckets. Down by 3, we could not let Sacramento get a bucket here on this possession, as we would force a turnover, and Brandon Jennings would pull up, fading off 1 foot and hit this 3, and then it would be Dante Wooden, not from 3 but mid-range, to give us a lead. 13 seconds to go, Aaron Brooks would drive the lane trying to tie this game up, but he would miss and we would get the rebound. With only 7 seconds left, Brandon Jennings would take this and run around the court. I don't know why they weren't fouling him, as finally they would get to him in the corner, and after he knocked down both of his free throws. 0.4 seconds would not be enough for the Kings to come back from down by 4, and we would get the come from behind victory here in game number 4, with not only Dante Wooden putting up a fantastic 21 for us, but Brandon Jennings posting an incredible 13 assists as well. With that game being won, we were now only one win away from winning the NBA Finals. This was the most important game in this entire series so far, as we had a chance to win the NBA Finals here at home. We would get off to a good start in this game by scoring the first bucket of the night, but it wouldn't take long for Sacramento to respond from deep. That didn't slow us down though, as we found ourselves getting out to an early lead over the Kings here in the first quarter, and before the end of it, we had gone up by double digits over them. We would get one more bucket to go up by 12 over Sacramento, so things were looking pretty good for us at the end of the first quarter, headed into the second. I thought we were going to start off with a 3 here, but Dante Wooden's foot was on the line, and if we'd learned anything in this series, it was that Sacramento does not go away easily. They were trying their best to get back in this game, but this time Dante Wooden would be behind the arc, making it an 11-point lead, but Sacramento was still slowly chipping away at this lead we had. Up by 11 again, we would find Andrew Bogut on the pick and roll for one last bucket, and that would send us into halftime with a 13-point lead over Sacramento. Again, no lead was safe against this team, especially in the second half, and we could not let DeMarcus Cousins and Tyreek Hill get hot for their offense tonight. Thankfully, they hadn't been able to slow down Andrew Bogut at all, as he already had 14 points, and our bench unit was playing great tonight too, as Marcus Everett would knock down this 3-pointer, and we would head to the fourth quarter with a 14-point lead and counting after this shot. With just over 3 minutes to go, it wasn't looking great for Sacramento, as we had our backups in the game at this point, and with 30 seconds to go and being down by 16, it wasn't looking like the Kings would get back in this game, as we would wrap up game 5 with a huge 17-point victory over the Kings, not only giving us the win here at home, but allowing us to lift the Larry O'Brien Trophy for the first time here in this series. Brandon Jennings would be named your NBA Finals MVP, but after celebrating and going to the White House, it was already time for us to retool and rebuild in the offseason, which is where we will start next episode.